I thank you for the opportunity to contribute to the debate on this historic and overdue legislation. Madam Speaker, the government is seeking through this bill to bring Trinidad and Tobago up to speed with the rest of the region and other countries with respect to cannabis law reform. Through this legislative measure, Madam Speaker, an innovative green industry will gain official recognition in Trinidad and Tobago, and it would spawn a massive processing trade. The Cannabis Control Bill would also establish an institution to regulate that industry and would demark who could participate and who could benefit commercially. The legislation, Madam Speaker, would also have the result of removing the long-standing stigma that has been associated with cannabis cultivation and its associated use. But Madam Speaker, cannabis is nothing new to Trinidad and Tobago, and it must not be dealt with in such a manner either. To do so, Madam Speaker, would dishonor and disregard our past. The herb, as the Attorney General referred to it, was brought to the West Indies, especially Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Jamaica, during the Indian labor indentureship. It was smoked in what they referred to as chillums by the masses and used for purposes of therapy, worship, and relaxation. But as indicated by the Attorney General, sometime around 1915-1916, the colonial authorities assented to a ganja ordinance which prohibited the cultivation of the plant. A more prohibitive law was enacted in 1928 as well. But cannabis, which was also called Indian hemp, was used freely for years until it was deemed by the authorities to be a cause of immense social problems. Punishments were imposed even though illegal plantations flourished in rural forested areas and there was a thriving underworld market. Those fields, Madam Speaker, serviced cannabis users and lifted many a farmer in rural communities and their families out of a life of poverty. This split approach, Madam Speaker, to cannabis is one of stark contradictions of life in Trinidad and Tobago. For many years, our country was held prisoner to backward thinking and repressive colonial laws. It is regrettable, Madam Speaker, that there could be no removal of the blemished records of thousands of people who over the years utilized cannabis for medical ailments or for simple pleasure and relaxations. Many of those people served rough prison terms or paid major fines for a herb whose use goes back centuries in various civilizations around the world. Some of those convicts, especially impressionable youths, later embarked on lives of serious crimes. They destroyed people's lives, Madam Speaker, and they wrecked their own lives as well. In many cases, they were indoctrinated into the criminal lifestyle while they were behind bars. Today, Madam Speaker, the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is debating a legislative measure that generally conforms to modern scientific, legal, social, and economic research and an associated accepted wisdom in the industry. But the Honourable Minister and the government should not be so quick to take a lap of honour for the proposed reform that is before us. Now, Madam Speaker, the opposition appreciates the momentous achievement that is being made in this Parliament today. Let me be clear from the outset. The opposition bench is fully supportive of the establishment of this burgeoning industry as long as the legislation which protects the interests and rights of the citizens is closely monitored, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, based on that, we do have some valid concerns which we would express during this debate. Those concerns relate broadly to the legal, administrative, some medicinal, sacramental, and other core aspects of the bill that is before, and that was before the Joint Select Committee as well, Madam Speaker. we are also very apprehensive about who would benefit from the major industry that would emerge. Permit me, Madam Speaker, to congratulate my colleagues, the member for Komoto Manzanilla, Dr. Rai Ragbir, and Senator Jayanti Lakshmi of the other place for their insightful contributions to the Joint Select Committee. Madam Speaker, the current re-examination of cannabis laws in the region follows the establishment of the CARICOM Regional Commission on Marijuana in 2014 in St. Vincent. The Honourable Member for Siparia, as Prime Minister, was pivotal, along with her fellow leaders, in the establishment of that very same commission, Madam Speaker. The commission was mandated to review the legal regimes regulating cannabis in light of the fast-evolving global trends at that time. CARICOM leaders recognized that the region would be left behind unless there was an urgent and relevant re-examination of existing laws. Madam Speaker, the Commission reported in June of 2018. Since then, as you would be well aware, Madam Speaker, several CARICOM countries have moved forward with appropriate new legislation. Unfortunately, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is among the last of the blocks with respect to major cannabis legislative reform. Antigua and Barbuda was amongst the first in 2018 with the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill, which permitted limited personal use of cannabis. Our government later brought legislation to decriminalize limited personal use of cannabis. St. Vincent and the Grenadines not only modernized its applicable legislation, but, Madam Speaker, they created a massive and a progressive cultivation industry on those islands. That country's government, Madam Speaker, maximized the use of its suitable terrain, its location, and its valuable small farmers, Madam Speaker. Jamaica, Dominica, St. Kitts Nevis, and other CARICOM neighbors have also legalized and regulated cannabis use. Madam Speaker, there's a wind of change in the cannabis industry that is sweeping this region. You see, Madam Speaker, the global cannabis industry is being projected to be worth $197 billion in 6 years' time. That forecast, Madam Speaker, was made in January of this year by the respected Fortune Business Insight. There have been various projections by different institutions, but it is obvious to all that the cannabis industry is a flourishing business, and we ought not to get left behind. This stunning forecast financially are being attributed due to several factors, Madam Speaker. The most crucial reason is the increasing awareness about the therapeutic and medicinal benefits of cannabis as an organic product. As we all know, cannabis is used to treat a number of ailments, Madam Speaker, including Alzheimer's, cancer, and several neurological orders. Fortune described the global cannabis market as unprecedented and staggering. A recent report of a London-based organization named Cannabis Business Plan said the prospective markets in Latin America and the Caribbean would be worth $800 million by 2026, Madam Speaker. That's just 4 years down the road from today. That latter report said that the region would benefit from labor costs that are 80% lower than what is found in North America, Madam Speaker. So even while the government is hailing this legislation before us today, we must appreciate that Trinidad and Tobago, under this administration, is already behind most of the progressive nations in this industry. And international timelines confirm this fact, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is and it can be a stark commentary on our country's leadership, which we must address. After all, most people today can testify of the overdue need to diversify our stagnant economy, secure new sources of foreign exchange, establish downstream activities, and create employment. Madam Speaker, This situation exists despite the fact that Trinidad and Tobago has a long familiarity with cannabis, with our skilled farmers and appropriate weather. We have the capacity here in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker, to set up the appropriate processing industries, utilize export chains, and market our brand, Trinidad and Tobago. We could benefit from a transfer of technology in a fast-growing sector. We could boost the tourism sector in the manner that Jamaica and other forward-thinking CARICOM nations are doing. This is a real opportunity, Madam Speaker, to set up a green economy. It will not come greener than this, Madam Speaker. There are lucrative openings for a wide range of participants, from low-skilled players to major high-tech investors. This is welcomed in a post-pandemic era saddled with extremely high unemployment across the streams in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, there will be opportunities for the common man to the sophisticated entrepreneur. And yet, Madam Speaker, taking this into consideration, this legislation is only now before our Parliament. We should note, Madam Speaker, that the law which is before us today will not get a life until the Cannabis Licensing Authority is established and the applicable regulations are introduced. Madam Speaker, all of this could take several more months or years with the pace of this government's performance in recent times, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, let us therefore appreciate that Trinidad and Tobago is playing catch-up with the rest of the world in facilitating the establishment of a structured cannabis industry. Madam Speaker, allow me to comment a bit on the regulations which ought to be followed up by the Cannabis Authority once put together. Madam Speaker, I feel a bit uneasy because I recall the manner in which the government made some errors with the simple matter of the COVID-19 face mask regulations. This entire Parliament, if you would recall, Madam Speaker, became a bit of a laughing stock of the entire country when there was undebated regulations. The country saw it as a bit pathetic and unreasonable by the majority of citizens at that time. I can only hope that the government improves its efficiency on this matter and bring regulations for full scrutiny and debate in the shortest time frame as soon as the authorities are assembled and they start their work. I also expect the government would prevail upon the authority at that time to treat the creation of regulations with the urgent priority that it deserves. In all of this, Madam Speaker, the authority would require relevant human and technical resources to undertake its functions in a competent manner. We are all aware, Madam Speaker, that various institutions, including in most recent times the judiciary, the DPP's office, often cry out about the absence of requisite support systems. As recently in January this year, Madam Speaker, the procurement regulator said that there were about 18 companies that had questionable practices, but he too did not have the resources to carry out certain investigations. That was said before a public accounts committee most recently, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we must make sure that there should be no situation like this with the Cannabis Licensing Authority. Any red tape would only set back Trinidad and Tobago's involvement in this mushrooming industry. Clause 20 indicates, Madam Speaker, that funding would come from the Consolidated Fund and other sources. It is critical that the government makes appropriate annual provisions to the consolidated funds as to avoid these very same issues that are hampering these other state agencies. We do not want the authority to be hampered by lack of funds, because we will continue to remain left behind the rest of the region and the world, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, to this end, I would like in the wind-up that if the Honorable Acting Attorney General could provide us a firm guarantee that this would be the case and the funds will be provided. Madam Speaker, with respect to board memberships, members should not only meet the stipulated qualifications, but must be seen to be independent, upstanding, and well-respected, Madam Speaker. We must be very careful that the public doesn't see these directors as surrogates of politicians who are looking to invest in the industry. There must be scrupulous selection of these directors as a matter of great urgency. Madam Speaker, my medical colleagues will develop the point, but I wish to recommend that Clause 6.2 be amended to stipulate the appointment of a director with qualifications and experience in psychiatry. Comparative authorities in other countries, Madam Speaker, have included such a director because of the psychotropic effects on the use of cannabis. So we feel having someone there with the requisite skill will lead to proper drafting of regulation, policing, monitoring, and so on. I also recommend that Clause 15.1 be amended to add knowledge in agriculture. I just heard the Honorable Attorney General make mention of that as well. But as one of the critical qualifications required for the Chief Executive Officer. After all, Madam Speaker, cannabis is first and foremost an agricultural endeavor, so some knowledge from the eyes of the CEO would be very critical to the success of the authority. Madam Speaker, with respect to confidentiality, which the Honorable Acting Attorney General just spoke of, which is dealt somewhere in Clause 18, there should also be enshrined provisions for whistleblowing as well, as one of the key considerations. This should relate to directors, all employees of the authority as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I now wish to comment on the matter of licensing, which is a huge part of the function of the Cannabis Authority, and which is also crucial and really involves the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is the most fundamental aspect of this legislation, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I were to draw your attention to Jamaica as a regional leader in the industry, they could provide much guidance and support to our budding operations. The organization BMC Globalization and Health in 2021, in a study, they described Jamaica as being at the forefront of cannabis law reform in the developing world. Madam Speaker, as said by the Attorney General acting, the Jamaican authorities were very helpful in assisting the Joint Select Committee. But I wish to recommend that they should be tapped for further support with respect to ownership of companies entering the industry. And Madam Speaker, that is an area that we have most concerns in terms of ownership, and I will explain why ownership is critical in terms of the national interest. Jamaica, Madam Speaker, has utilized its commercial licensing regime to facilitate foreign investments while safeguarding its domestic industry. Foreign partnerships have assisted in financial investments and the transfer of technical knowledge. But we must utilize the skill and knowledge of others to enhance our upcoming industry. Jamaica has engaged in research and development, which is essential to an evolving industry. But Madam Speaker, the Jamaican authorities have guarded against predatory shareholder arrangements and domestic political interference. The Jamaican legislation, Madam Speaker, was very clear and concise on these regulatory matters, which we hope that the Cannabis Authority will take into consideration when drafting their regulations. Madam Speaker, in Jamaica, there is a 51% local ownership and control in international partners. That is very significant, Madam Speaker, because I would want that the local company must have a say on issues around employment, numbers, things that are critical to the nationals of Trinidad and Tobago. If we do otherwise, we will give a foreign partner the opportunity to dictate the pace, which at some point in time could work against our local people here, Madam Speaker. Barbados and other regional states have legislated 70-30 agreements in favor of domestic players. The Honorable Attorney General Acton just indicated that in our legislation, we're looking at 30% local ownership, Madam Speaker. That is something that we would like the Attorney General to revisit, have the regulators, when the authority is put together, to review that, taking into consideration what is happening in the region in terms of ownership or shareholding of these companies, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, early on, Jamaica and other islands realized that effective legislation was required in transitioning from illegal to legal cannabis markets and in supporting small-scale cultivators. And this is where it's very, very important and critical, Madam Speaker. In Jamaica, taking note of the amount of small farmers, they went ahead and they established a tier-based system to develop these small farmers. So in Jamaica, they softened the entry requirements by issuing what they call a cultivator's transitional special permit, which gave these small farmers 30 months to graduate into a full-scale operator. So in that way, they formed a type of incubator to make sure that our small farmers become part of the burgeoning and developing industry, and they were not pushed away because of their size, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in Jamaica, that measure was called the Alternative Development Program. The program was well received by all indications, Madam Speaker, and it has been very, very successful in its purpose. We commend it back to the Attorney General for his consideration at the committee stage. But Madam Speaker, sadly to say that in our legislation, as it is drafted, there is very little or no provisions outside of what is going to come in the regulation that is going to protect our small farmers. I haven't seen it. None of my colleagues who were at the committee was able to sift through what was being proposed. And I can tell you the Attorney General at that time was very, very clear that most of these matters that were raised advised that it would be dealt with at the regulation stage. So we want to put it on the record that we look forward to see this being dealt with, or at least have a conversation at the regulation stage, Madam Speaker. But I will leave much of that discussion to my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Muruga Tableland, who will have much more to say on the matters of small farmers, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I just draw your attention quickly again to Barbados and other territories that have created mechanisms for quality control. For example, licensees must have quality testing before trading. Effective quality control would put justified pressure on fly-by-night operators and ensure safe products are dispensed to the public. Again, these things should be captured in the regulation, so we're putting it on the record for consideration. Madam Speaker, if I were to draw your attention to Part 4 of the bill, which provides for licensing of applicants, it makes no stipulations for the effective protection of local investors. And that is something that is part of a lot of other legislation in other jurisdictions. What is missing, Madam Speaker, is that the legislation doesn't have what I would describe as a philosophical outlook as to what this new industry is aimed at achieving and who are to be the major financial beneficiaries. In reading the legislation, one has to look very, very carefully and closely to see where the legislation is going and who will eventually be the primary beneficiaries of this new industry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in our liberalized environment, therefore, we could find exploitative investors setting up predatory joint venture arrangements. There are several such models around the world, Madam Speaker, and what is happening, you have what you call big cannabis is developing in some jurisdictions, similar to big tobacco and big pharma in the pharmaceutical industry. Trinidad and Tobago, through this legislation, through this parliament, we must guard against becoming a sardine swimming in a world of ferocious cannabis sharks, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the well-regarded Forbes magazine reported in its edition of December 31st, 2021, that large corporations are challenging certain states in the United States on this very same matter. Those states are right now, Madam Speaker, writing laws to preserve control for their domestic companies. But the big operators are hiring top lawyers, Madam Speaker, and they're going to court to fight this legislation that is coming. So, Madam Speaker, businesses with deep pockets are going to fight to get the lion's share of this industry. The government must be decisive in insisting that the liberalized cannabis industry must, and at all times, bring the greatest benefits to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And the government must be proactive in doing so as well, Madam Speaker. That means there must be relevant stipulations in the bill that is before us. For example, Madam Speaker, the Honorable Attorney General spoke to the Rastafarian community, which utilizes cannabis for sacramental purposes. And they are allowed to do so under this bill to dispense under the non-profit organization system. But, Madam Speaker, this community is already allowed to cultivate and consume for purposes in private spaces. Why not let us address the issue of allowing use and limited cultivation in the public space that as a registered place of worship, amendments to the Dangerous Drug Act, and allow that community to perhaps look at a commercial operation, because as the Attorney General said, they were pivotal in driving this whole conversation about the removal from the Dangerous Drug Act and so on. So perhaps we should have legislation to ensure that communities like those not only are left as consumers, but can get into the commercial operation as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, they must have a meaningful and sustainable stake in this emerging industry as well. In the absence of that type of affirmative action by the government, Madam Speaker, our cannabis industry could become a modern-day version of investment by invitation. Madam Speaker, you would recall that Sir Arthur Lewis, the Nobel laureate, had advocated for this model many, many years ago. But that investment approach was appropriate for the period when this post-colonial Caribbean country was seeking to rebuild a one-track plantation economy. But Trinidad and Tobago now has resources and experience in charting our own economic future, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we do have experts in Trinidad and Tobago, advisors in the industry, who have written for several of the local regional territories. And I mean, we do have the resources that can be put in place to ensure that we get the best possible legislation for the best possible outcome to benefit the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I strongly urge the government to introduce a clause under Part 4 to stipulate majority local ownership in all organizations seeking licenses. This could be fashioned clearly after the legislations of other CARICOM territories. Madam Speaker, licensing for medical, therapeutic, and scientific purposes must bring the greatest rewards to every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. We must be aware that potential big operators would come beating down our doors. This has been the experience in Jamaica, and while I am saddened that we are last of the block, but we have the benefit for the most amount of experience learning from those other territories, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, companies may want to invest in medical capsules, balms, roll-ons, and other products, edibles, cannabis-infused water, and other items commercially, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Jamaica has a company called Jacana, which has been certified to export medical cannabis as a natural relief for chronic pain through its alliance with a pharmaceutical company. So, Madam Speaker, these are the type of opportunities that lay before us when this bill is passed and regulations made, and it's done in the right way. Madam Speaker, that subset in the medical cannabis industry is worth tens of millions of dollars. And people around the world, as you would know, they are seeking out natural, organic solutions for most medical problems today. They are losing their reliance on chemical medicine and looking for organic options, Madam Speaker. But, Madam Speaker, again, we have a very low ranking on the ease of doing business matrices, and it's a deterrent to investment. We must address this deficiency now. If we want to attract these companies who have the technology, who may have the financing to drive the industry, we cannot bog them down with issues in the ease of doing businesses that will deter them and turn them away and send them away to other regional players, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this cannabis authority that is going to be formed out of this legislation today will have a tremendous sway with respect to growing cannabis and manufacturing, transporting, research, and the exporting of all associated products. Madam Speaker, literally, this authority is going to be really an economic powerhouse that our legislation and our regulation must manage and must manage carefully, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago, we would stand alone in CARICOM if we refuse to explicitly legislate on this matter of company ownership and the awarding of licenses, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there's another concern that was brought up at the committee stage, and again, the Honorable Attorney General at that time advised that regulations would take care of it. The cultivator license, as it stands now, Madam Speaker, does not indicate how much land can be utilized. Size, geographic location, proximity to schools, hospitals, and so on. Madam Speaker, we felt that, like the Jamaican legislation, this thing should be spelled out clearly in the parent law, and then the regulations can deal with the item specifics going forward. Madam Speaker, if I were to draw your attention to the retail distributor license as well, in the legislation as it is written, there is very little or no tying to pharmacies and no reference to the Pharmacy Act or the Pharmacy Board. There is the matter of intellectual property, as the Attorney General indicated as well. That IP has an inherent value outside of the physical product as well. Just the method of processing and creating the brand and so on has an IP system as well, Madam Speaker. Although we are lagging a bit behind, we must foresee a day when licensed cultivation facilities, processing operations, retail dispensaries, mass transportation arrangements, wellness spas, export markets, this is going to be something that will carry our brand, and we have an opportunity to earn precious foreign income from that as well. Madam Speaker, if I just want to draw your attention very quickly to the Prime Minister of St. Kitts Nevis, Dr. Timothy Harris. He told his parliament that the interests of locals, particularly the Rastafarians, would be protected. So in May 2019, he addressed his National Assembly, and he said, and I quote him, "Non-nationals would not be permitted to secure an advantage over nationals as we set out to build our marijuana industry." And he was very, very clear on that. Madam Speaker, as you would know, St. Kitts Nevis is one of the smallest independent nations in the Western world, but its Prime Minister said he was determined to make it amongst the most advanced and forward-looking countries in the world. Madam Speaker, I strongly urge that the government revisits this during the committee stage. I now just turn quickly to provisions in Part 5 of the bill, which deals with medicinal cannabis. My colleague for Kumoto, Manzanilla, and others would expand on these issues, but it's our view that clauses 42 to 46 should capture that cannabis use in children and adolescents must be prescribed by a specialist pediatrician. The bill provides for the issuance of both a medical prescription and a medical recommendation, and provides for medicinal cannabis to be dispensed from both a registered pharmacy and a dispensary. But Madam Speaker, it does not provide any differentiation on the medical cannabis products issued by prescription or recommendation or sold at a pharmacy or dispensary. The bill is missing a large part to make the access to medicinal cannabis functional in our respective view, which is the separation of medicinal cannabis into prescribable and non-prescribable medicinal cannabis, which would make the provision before us a bit more sensible, Madam Speaker. My colleagues, when they take the lectern later on, Madam Speaker, will get into some more details on that medical component. Madam Speaker, Clause 45, 3 and 4 provides a role for a caregiver, but such a person is not defined clearly in the legislation itself. I hope this is done in the regulations, because ambiguity at this stage, Madam Speaker, could have serious negative consequences, where you may have people assigning themselves as caregiver roles, and they are the users. They become abusers of the drug as well, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to spend the last couple of minutes I have dealing very briefly on the issue of the cannabis for sacramental usage. This is such a critical and extensive matter in Jamaica that they saw it fit to put it under the remit of the Ministry of Justice, so as to be separated from the administration of the medical use of cannabis. Madam Speaker, my primary concern in this case is that religious organizations can be subverted by criminals for illegal financial activities, and in particular, money laundering. I was very vocal on this matter during the Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker. Again, the Honorable Attorney General at that time advised that he felt comfortable and confident that the NPO legislation would protect at that point in time. But this is not to suggest that any religious organization is involved in illicit or underworld functions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, but we remain troubled. With all of that, we remain troubled about the possible abuse of Clause 47, which directs the prohibition of commercial use for religious purposes. Madam Speaker, what happens if a legitimate religious organization is infiltrated and undermined by nefarious operators? What if such an organization then becomes a conduit for illegal financial dealings? Member for San Fernando West has repeatedly spoken in this House about the proliferation of money laundering activities in this country, Madam Speaker. And he too has acknowledged that there is financial crookedness in this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, such operators have a reputation for being cunning and conniving and manipulative that we must guard against, Madam Speaker. We do not want religious bodies to become the subject of abuse, and as the Attorney General said, there is no law, there is no constitutional design of what a religious organization is. So there is opportunity for some abuse inside it that our regulations and legislation should pay mindful eye to. Madam Speaker, in addition to that, there must be clarity on how these dispensaries in the sacramental locations would operate. Would they operate or be modeled after like the CDAP operations? If that is not the case, what will be the business plan? Madam Speaker, the bill also is lacking a bit in addressing something very important: tracking and monitoring systems used in every country with regulated cannabis to track inventory, financial transactions. And this is to prevent the diversion of product and, most importantly, the evasion of taxes, and to allow for product recall in the event there's a problem with a batch. And obviously, most importantly, the promotion of good anti-money laundering principles. Again, we speak to a register system, but again, we want to ensure that at the time of the provision of the regulations, this area is focused clearly and precisely, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Clause 48(1)(c) provides for 30 grams of cannabis to be dispensed to each religious adherent. The question is, how often is this permissible? Once a week, once a month, 5 times a day. This could put a certain inherent danger in the sacramental component of dispensing of this highly dangerous substance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in the last minute that I have, a couple of minutes, I want to refer to Clause 60, which provides for compliance inspections with or without notice. Member for Chaguanas West will speak some more in terms of a lot of the key legal areas where we do find some challenges in the existing legislation, Madam Speaker. But suffice to say that an inspector is only required to produce a certificate of appointment before he enters the relevant premises. We would want to know if this procedure is consistent with other laws and our constitutional rights and privileges, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, banking issues, commercial banking issues, that has not been addressed in the legislation in any meaningful way. Would locals have to face international banking issues considering that the cannabis trade is illegal in certain jurisdictions. The matter of commercial banking must be comprehensively addressed. The bill doesn't treat with this issue, Madam Speaker, and we look forward to seeing some amendments in those areas. Madam Speaker, should there be specially designated medical cannabis consumption lounges? That is something that we raised during the committee stage, because consumers may run the risk of a breach of the law if they decide to use their medicine within 500 feet of a school, or if they live in tenanted apartments, which prohibits the smoking of marijuana inside there. So, Madam Speaker, it's important that we decide how we're going to deal with this in terms of our tourism and so on. Madam Speaker, there are several matters that will come up during the debate today, and I know my colleagues will continue to bring them up. But suffice to say, we are at a new frontier with an old industry. Cannabis is coming out of the woodwork, Madam Speaker. The government has to be judicious and responsible on how it moves forward. Most of all, this legislation has to serve the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, with those few words, I want to thank you for the opportunity of sharing my views. Thank you.
Member for St. Joseph.